Well, so today we shall discuss about the forensic medicine questions which had appeared in the recently concluded INI-CET 2021 July. Okay. Well, before we begin with the session, I just want to put out a disclaimer that obviously these are the questions which we call as recall questions. So the exact question and the exact options might not be the verbatim one which were exactly posed in the examination. Okay, but definitely the question will pertain to the topic and the subject which I'll be discussing. So we have collected as many questions as possible. So I am sure I'll be covering all the questions which had appeared in the recent one. Again, putting out a disclaimer that it's a recall question. So bear with me if the options or the framing of the question is not as per which you had attempted in your examination. Okay. Well, let's start now. Let's begin with the very first question. So there was a question on 47XXY. So there is syndrome 47XXY. There was a question on that. I don't exactly remember the question, but there was a question which was pertaining to the features of 47XXY. Okay, and again, I would like to say, and happily I would like to say that almost all the questions that appeared in this INI-CET were from the notes of eGurukul. So the notes, so the screenshot of the notes, I've taken them and I've put them for your reference. So they are directly from the notes what has been provided to you. And definitely, I hope the students who have read the notes well would have indefinitely attempted correctly all the questions of forensic medicine. Okay. Now 47XXY. So what is it? So 47XXY, it is definitely Klinefelter syndrome. Okay. Klinefelter syndrome. It is Klinefelter syndrome as very clearly is the, what are the features of Klinefelter syndrome and what is Klinefelter syndrome? So Klinefelter is wherein the person is anatomically male, but the nuclear sexing will be that of the female. The person will be anatomically male, but the nuclear sexing will be that of the female. So what are the characteristic features? Delayed onset of puberty, gynecomastia, atrophy of the testis, azoospermia, impotence, sterility. The person will have the features of eunuchoidism. Eunuchoidism meaning long legs, long arms, and very scanty body hair. So I'll come again. Let's look here. So delayed onset of puberty, gynecomastia, testicular atrophy, lower levels of testosterone leading to impotence and sterility. Some textbooks even mention micropenis. They mention micropenis. Then azoospermia, and these three together. I'll just take another color over here. Let's take a pen. So these three, that is long legs, long arms, and scanty body hair. So these three together, some books refer it as eunuchoidism. Eunuchoidism. So these are all the features of Klinefelter syndrome, 47XXY. Then what is 45XO? So this was the question. So what is 45XO? As you all know, this is Turner syndrome. This is Turner syndrome. So what is Turner syndrome? Exactly opposite to this, wherein the person will be anatomically female, but the nuclear sexing will be deviated towards that of male. Okay. So what are the characteristics of Turner syndrome? Going with it. So this what we call as, it's characterized by a triad of features. Turner is characterized by a triad of features. Short stature, sexual infantilism. Sexual infantilism. So what is sexual infantilism? How this individual is an infant sexually. What are the features of this? So the features of sexual infantilism will be like primary amenorrhea, sterility, poor development of breast, widely spaced nipples, hypoplastic areola, infantile vagina and infantile uterus, and streaked ovaries. Okay, and then the last part is congenital anomalies. These are the triad of Turner. So what are the congenital anomalies that we see here? If you go from above downwards, you won't miss anything. Color blindness, high arched palate, webbing of the neck, coarctation of aorta, cubitus valgus deformity, spina bifida, and short fourth metatarsals. Short fourth metatarsals. So 47XXY or 45XO, either of that can be a question for you. Okay, let's move to the next question. It's getting repeated. So this question is getting repeated. Filigree burns. So I suppose an image was given regarding the filigree burns. Okay. So the other names, filigree burns, arborescent markings, Lichtenberg flares, all mean one and the same. These are the lesions caused by lightning. These are the lesions caused by lightning. Again, directly taken from the notes. We are directly have the notes here. Let's take a highlighter. Okay. So these filigree burns or Lichtenberg burns, as very clearly see, I provided you two there are three photographs. So one is this, the one. So three photographs giving you the typical appearance of Lichtenberg flares or the filigree burns or arborescent markings. So these are the most specific lesions of lightning. So what are they? They're superficial, irregular, and tortuous, irregular markings which basically resemble the branches of a tree or a fern, and hence the name filigree burns. So the most commonly seen over the shoulders, flanks, and front of the chest. Shoulders, flanks, back, and front of the chest is what most commonly they are seen. So they represent the path taken by the electric discharge. They represent the path taken by the discharge. If at all the person survives, so they get resolved by themselves in 1 to 2 days. Okay, if a person survives, they get resolved by 1 to 2 days. So what is the mechanism of formation? There are theories. One, so there will be rupture of blood vessels, small blood vessels along the line of flow of electric current. So along the line of flow of discharge, there is rupture of small vessels, hemolysis, and the hemoglobin will stain the tissues along the path. Hemolysis, hemoglobin staining the tissues. And second, the deposition of copper along the path of the discharge. So both are the theories. One is hemolysis, another is deposition of copper. Okay, so Lichtenberg flares is a repeated question. Very typical image will be given to you. They are specific lesions in lightning. Let's move to the next one. The question goes somewhat like this. It goes somewhat like this. A cloth was brought by police for examination. Definitely is subjected to Barberio's test. So this test detects what? Okay, it was subjected to Barberio's test. So first, this is the important one. So what does it detect? Okay, options somewhat like this: fructose, choline, spermine, and acid phosphatase. Okay, so again, I've just put out the direct from the notes. So what is Barberio's test? So this test reaction depends on presence of spermine. So the Barberio's test depends on presence of spermine, which is secreted from prostate. It's a test for semen. It's a test for semen. Okay, depends on presence of spermine in the semen. Okay, which is secreted from prostate. So what does it give? The reaction gives. Let's go to the next slide. I'll discuss it more. Yes, Barberio's test. The test depends on presence of spermine, which comes from prostate. So reaction gives the yellow colored, sometimes even brown, but more specific yellow, needle-shaped rhombic crystals of spermine picrate. So spermine picrate and yellow colored needle shape. So how do they look? They look like this. So these are the images of spermine picrate Barberio's test. Very typical. Probably these will be very typical. Yellow needle-shaped crystals of spermine picrate. So Barberio's test, it's a test for semen analysis, which depends on presence of spermine secreted by prostate, and a positive test gives yellow colored rhombic shaped spermine picrate. Now there were some other options also. Let's look into other options here. The Florence test is the one which detects choline. So Florence test, again a test for semen. So that detects choline in the semen, which comes from seminal vesicles. Okay. So Florence test detects choline. Okay. So choline is responsible for, in fact, that the bluish, this is also a question for you. It is responsible for bluish white fluorescence of seminal stains under UV light. So questions are asked. It's a repeated question again. Semen upon ultraviolet light gives a bluish white fluorescence. It gives a bluish white fluorescence. That is again because of choline. It's again because of choline. So positive test or positive Florence test, it gives dark brown. So dark brown rhombic shaped or needle shaped crystals of choline iodide. It gives crystals of choline iodide. Okay, so how do they look? So this test is not very specific for semen, as several substances on animal and vegetable origin can also give you positive results. It's not very specific. To be very specific for the semen, it is acid phosphatase. We'll come to that later. Okay, so the choline iodide crystals, they look like this: dark brown, rhombic shape. Very clearly, this image shows you dark brown rhombic shaped needle crystals. Okay, so it looks like this. So another way of representing it, it's a repeated question: choline iodide, dark brown rhombic shaped crystals again. Now coming to acid phosphatase test, it's also one of the option, I suppose, secreted by prostate. Okay, so the activity of acid phosphatase in human semen is 500 to 10,000 times greater than in any other body fluid. So the activity of acid phosphatase in seminal fluid is 500 to 1000 times more than any other body fluid. So normal for acid phosphatase activity in human semen 340 to 360 Bodensky units. Okay, concentration of anything more than 100 Bodensky units indicates ejaculation occurred within 12 hours of examination. All these are questions for you. Positive reactions can be found up to 36 hours after ejaculation in the vaginal secretions. Positive reactions are found up to 36 hours after ejaculation in vaginal secretions. Acid phosphatase test is a conclusive in absence of demonstrable sperms. See, the conclusive test for semen. The conclusive test for semen is microscopic demonstration of one intact spermatozoa. Microscopic demonstration of one intact spermatozoa is the absolute confirmatory test for semen. But what if the person is azoospermic? If he is azoospermic, then acid phosphatase will be the conclusive test in the absence of sperms. Okay. Well, let's move to the next question now. That's about the spermine, choline, and acid phosphatase. Let's move to the next question. So the question, I suppose, was pertaining regarding a match the following. Let me take the pen here. Match the following. Lathi causes what type of lesion? Okay, tram line bruise. Tram line bruise. Now, what is tram line bruise? I'll show you a photograph of that. Now, as you can see here, see, this is the tram line bruise. So, what is tram line bruise? See, tramline bruise is caused by, tramline is nothing but a railway line. You can just simply call it as a railway line bruise. So, tramline bruise is caused by an object or a weapon like that of an iron rod or a stick or a lathi. A lathi or an iron rod or a stick produces, upon impact upon the body, it produces two parallel lines. As you can see here, two parallel lines. There are multiple two parallel lines over here. Okay, with an intact skin in between. There will be two parallel lines of contusion like this with an intact skin in between. So very clearly it can be shown here, very clearly. Okay, so there are two parallel lines of contusion with an intact skin in between, which resemble a railway track or a tram line. So that is why they're called as tram line bruise. Very clearly it is depicted over here in this part. So wherein there are multiple parallel lines with an intact skin in between, tram line bruise by an lathi. Okay. Next, incised wound was one of the option. I mean, blade was the option which can cause, or any sharp weapon can cause incised wound. Now, the photograph, in fact, which I've shown you here, there are multiple superficial parallel incised wounds. Multiple superficial parallel incised wounds. So, what are they? So, this is a photograph very typically depicting hesitation cuts. So, this photograph depicts hesitation cut or trial cuts. Trial cuts, also called as tentative cuts. Tentative cuts. So what do they indicate? They indicate suicidal nature of injury. So hesitation cuts, tentative cuts, or trial cuts, they're all incised wounds. One of the other option was axe, if I remember correctly. Yes, the fourth option, axe, which causes chop wound. This is a typical chop wound, as you can see here. a typical chop wound caused by a weapon like an axe. Okay. And the second one was road traffic accident causes grazed abrasion. Grazed abrasion. Now, in fact, all of these, I have explained this in the notes. All of these are in the notes. I've just taken a screenshot to explain that. So, grazed abrasion is the most common abrasion seen in road traffic accident. A repeated question. Grazed abrasion is a most common abrasion seen in road traffic accident. So, these are the grazed abrasions typically, as you can see here. So grazed abrasion, when larger part of the body is dragged across a larger rough surface. So when typically in road traffic accident, when the body is dragged against the floor of a road, so grazed abrasions are seen. Okay. So lathi or a iron rod causes tramline. Road traffic accident most common is grazed abrasion, blade or any sharp weapon, incised wounds, and chop wounds. Okay, so these are the photographs showing those injuries. Let's move to the next question. So I suppose there was a image very similar to this. I've given one of the best images pertaining to this question. So what was this question? It's already given here. Again, from the notes, the question depicts marbling. So the question depicts marbling of veins. So what is marbling? So very clearly, as you can see here. So marbling of veins. And in this particular body, yes, you can see it at many areas. You can see it in the many areas. Okay. Marbling of veins. So what are they? So these are marbling irregular or tortuous network of discolored veins. Irregular or tortuous network of discolored veins. Okay. Now, what is the medico-legal importance of that? That's a normal finding when a body is left for putrefaction. The medico-legal importance is marbling of vein indicates time since death of 36 to 48 hours. This is the medico-legal importance. A repeated question. Marbling of veins clearly indicates 36 to 48 hours. Okay. So they may be reddish brown most commonly, or can also be greenish. Okay. So these discoloration of veins can either be reddish brown or it can be even greenish. Now other points to be to remember here. Why that discoloration happens? So the discoloration of veins is seen in case of marbling, or the discoloration of tissues is seen in case of decomposition because of production of sulf-methemoglobin. So H2S combines with hemoglobin to produce sulf-methemoglobin, which is responsible for giving the discoloration during putrefaction. Okay. So other points regarding putrefaction to remember. So the most important agent which responsible for putrefaction, Clostridium welchii or welchii. Okay, the chief destructive agent which produces lecithinase. This is also a question for you. So Clostridium welchii producing lecithinase is the chief destructive agent in case of decomposition. Okay. The last organ to decompose. The last organ to decompose. This is a bit of a tricky question here in decomposition, because well, in males we say definitely prostate, and females we say uterus, particularly virgin uterus. But if bone happens to be one of the option, whether it's male or a female, your answer will definitely be bone. So bone will be the last organ to decompose irrespective of whether it's male or a female. If bone is not an option, then you have to go with prostate and uterus in case of females. And this is again a repeated question. Casper dictum. What is Casper dictum? So Casper dictum, rate of decomposition of body in air, water and earth. Rate of decomposition in air, water and earth. So for example, let's say if the time taken for a dead body to undergo decomposition in air is X, if the time taken is X, hours, minutes, whatever it is, if it is X, if the same body were to be placed in water, the time taken for the same amount of decomposition will be twice that, 2x. If the same body were to be buried within the soil, the time taken for the same amount of decomposition will be 8x. So air is to water is to earth, 1 is to 2 is to 8, rate of decomposition, Casper dictum. So basically it is marbling of veins, which it's a repeated question. The very good photographs I've shown you regarding marbling. Well, next is there was a question pertaining to findings in freshwater drowning. findings of freshwater drowning. Okay, I'll take the help of a take note so that I can explain it to you much better. Okay. Well, let's take this. Yes. Freshwater drowning. Okay. Let's take the line. Now, let's first discuss about freshwater drowning. Okay. Now, see the salinity of fresh water. The salinity of fresh water is 0.6% of NaCl. 0.6% of NaCl. What is the salinity of blood? The salinity of blood is, as you all know, 0.9 to 1.1. Okay. Now, water as it gains. Now, first let's discuss about fresh water. So, water as it gains entry from the trachea, bronchi, finally, large amount of water settles down within the alveoli. So, alveoli contains large amount of water whose salinity is 0.6. Alveoli contains large amount of water whose salinity is 0.6. Now, this alveoli is surrounded by intense network of pulmonary vasculature. Intense network of pulmonary vasculature which is carrying the blood whose salinity is 0.9 to 1.1, right? Whose salinity is 0.9 to 1.1. So what happens then? Inside 0.6, outside 0.9 to 1.1, a simple diffusion from lower gradient to the higher gradient. Okay, so simple diffusion from lower to higher, that is from within the alveoli, large amount of water enters into pulmonary circulation. So much so that the amount of water in the body or amount of blood that is increased will be about 3 to 3.5 liters in about 2 to 3 minutes. So body will have such massive amount of hypervolemic blood in the body. Okay. Now this large amount of blood, hypervolemic blood, will be carried from the pulmonary vessels to the heart. So the now heart is receiving this large amount of blood. So because this is receiving this large amount of blood, it has to pump it out very fast, isn't it? So sudden increase in the pumping action of the heart obviously causes cardiac arrhythmias. Cardiac arrhythmia. Okay. So then because of hemodilution, so swelling of the RBCs, rupture of the RBCs, release of potassium, there will be hyperkalemia. There will be hyperkalemia. Okay. Now let us just write down. So what all these changes we just discussed. So what all the changes that we discussed? So hypervolemia. So there will be increased hypervolemia, severe increase in the amount of blood. Hypervolemia. Then increased cardiac load. Increased cardiac load. So because of increased cardiac load where the heart has to pump it very fast, so this causes cardiac arrhythmias. Cardiac arrhythmia, particularly ventricular fibrillation, cardiac arrhythmia. So at the same time, obviously there will also be hemodilution, which causes rupture of RBCs and release of potassium, thereby extensive hyperkalemia. So when there is hyperkalemia and hemodilution, there has to be hyponatremia. So hypervolemia, hemodilution, increased cardiac load, cardiac arrhythmia, hyperkalemia and hyponatremia, typical features of freshwater drowning. Okay. Now let us come to seawater. See, the salinity of seawater is 3% NaCl. 3% NaCl. Imagine the same situation. Now the water in large quantities is within the alveoli, which is surrounded by pulmonary vasculature carrying the blood of 3%. Inside it is just inside it is 3%, outside carrying the blood 0.9 to 1.1. So inside the salinity is much more. Again, simple osmosis diffusion from lower to higher water from the pulmonary circulation enters the alveoli. So alveoli goes on swelling. Swelling of millions of alveoli leads to extensive pulmonary edema. Extensive pulmonary edema, so much so that the weight of each lung will be about 3 kgs. So pulmonary edema leads to asphyxia. So hemoconcentration causes hypernatremia and hypokalemia. So what are all the things that happen in seawater here? So first of all, hemoconcentration, okay, hemoconcentration, then extensive pulmonary edema leading to severe asphyxia. Then because of hemoconcentration, there will be extensive hypernatremia and hypokalemia. So this is what we call as pathophysiology of drowning. Okay, multiple questions are asked regarding this, so you should be aware of all this. Okay, now let us come to that. The same thing which was given over here. So again, from the notes, just depicting how all the things happen in the case of this, it is directly taken from the notes. Now the photograph I've shown you, the two very important features of antemortem drowning, which is a repeated question. A very rare photograph which shows both the features. As you can see, white froth from the nostrils. So white froth from the nostrils, copious white froth, antemortem drowning, and the features of cadaveric spasm. So features of cadaveric spasm and the froth both are depicted in a single photograph, a rare one, repeated question in case of drowning. Let's move to the next question. So the question was something like this. Female with secondary amenorrhea, normal breast and genitalia. The clinching word here, I'll just take the highlight now. Clinching is reduced 5-alpha reductase. With reduction of 5-alpha reductase, what is it? So the answer is male pseudohermaphroditism or male pseudohermaphrodite. Okay. Now, what are the features of male pseudohermaphroditism? See, in male pseudohermaphroditism, the gonads are definitely testis. The chromosomal pattern is definitely XY. The gonads are testis, the chromosomal pattern is XY, then what is the problem? See, the problem here is what we call as feminization of the testis. What is feminization? Feminization of testis meaning here is a condition wherein due to deficiency of 5-alpha reductase enzyme, testosterone is not converted into its active form dihydrotestosterone. So thereby the external genitalia will deviate towards female. So these people will have a well-formed breasts also, and even the external genitalia and the secondary sexual characters, they deviate towards that of female. So male pseudohermaphroditism, gonads are testis, nuclear sexing is XY. So what happens here? But the problem here is testicular feminization. Because of testicular feminization, external genitalia and secondary sexual characters, they deviate towards that of female. Testis fails to develop normally at puberty. Okay, so external sexual characters also deviate towards female. Well-formed breast is also seen. So what is testicular feminization? Just I said, it's an autosomal recessive disorder, in which there is deficiency of 5-alpha reductase enzyme, because of which the testosterone is not converted into its active form dihydrotestosterone. Okay, so these are the ones. Now, looking into the other options here, if you look into the other options, so what is female pseudohermaphroditism? On the very similar lines, a female pseudohermaphroditism is a condition wherein the gonads are definitely ovaries. The gonads are ovaries and the nuclear sexing is definitely XX. Then what is the problem here? The problem is congenital adrenal hyperplasia. The problem here is congenital adrenal hyperplasia. Now, because of adrenal hyperplasia and large amount of androgens, so the secondary sexual characters deviate towards that of the male. Okay, ovary, XX, but the problem is congenital adrenal hyperplasia. What is concealed sex? Concealed sex has been a question some couple of times. So what is concealed sex? The simplest of them. Here, a true male or a true female conceals his actual sexuality just by changing the external appearance or the dress or the attire. So here there is no gonadal anomaly, there is no chromosomal anomaly, there is nothing here. A person is just concealing his true sexuality by the change of external appearance. That's all. Okay. Then true hermaphrodite. True hermaphrodite, a very rare condition wherein These are the people who have both the gonads. They have both gonads, testes and ovary. Okay, they have both the gonads, testes and ovary. Either testes on one side and ovary on the other side, or a combined parenchyma, ovo-testes on both the sides. Okay, true hermaphrodite. So, well, so this is about that particular question. Answer is male pseudo hermaphrodite or hermaphroditism. Well, the next question was something like this. A skull was brought for forensic analysis, and what are the points which were in favor of the female skull? So, a skull was brought. What were the features which can favor or go in favor of female skull? Okay, I suppose there were certain options and you were asked to choose certain options. Okay, now again from the notes I have taken it. Okay, directly you can see very clearly can go on. See the major difference I'll tell you between the male and the female sex of the skull. Okay, see in the male skull, all the eminences, which are they? Supraorbital ridge. You can just note here, supraorbital ridge. Okay, then glabella, zygomatic arch, then mastoid process, external occipital protuberance. All these eminences are prominent in males, except two, the frontal and parietal eminence, So frontal and parietal eminences are always prominent in females. The major differentiating point, all eminences are prominent in males except frontal and parietal, which are prominent in females. Second important point, orbits. So orbits, in case of males, they are smaller, square in shape with rounded margins. Small, square with rounded margins. Whereas in females, they are larger, round in shape with sharp margins. These are the major differences. These points are the major differences between the male and the female skull. Okay, so I'll just take a highlight. Now let's look into other points. First of all, capacity. Males 1500 to 1550, females 1350 to 1450. Second, eminences. I just described, all are prominent in males except frontal and parietal, which will be prominent in case of females. Okay, orbits just discussed. Then mastoid process, obviously large in males, it is small in females. Digastric groove. Where do you find it? Just by the side of the mastoid process runs a deep groove, which is deep and prominent in males, and it is shallow and less prominent in case of females. Okay, so these are the ones major differentiating points between male and the female skull. Okay, again the question from the notes. Now I suppose there was a question here. Just look into those photographs. Just have a look. Okay, so there was some question regarding the fusion of medial end of the clavicle, and I suppose there was also in the same question was also mentioned about sternum. Sorry, I couldn't get the exact question, but here I'll describe you the fusion of the clavicle and that of the sternum both, and also we'll discuss about the skull. So all these three are very important, frequently asked questions for us. Okay, so let's first discuss about the medial end of the clavicle. So highlight, yes. So medial end of the clavicle appears by 18 to 19 years. So medial end appears by 18 to 19 years. Fusion 20 to 22 years, and I suppose this was the expected answer. So medial end of the clavicle appears by 18 to 19 years, fuses by 20 to 22 years. Okay. Now coming to sternum. Okay. Now sternum, I'll just take the help of take note to make you understand. Okay. See, regarding sternum, so there are obviously three parts: manubrium, body, and the xiphi, right? The appearance of the ossification centers, you can remember that as 5, 5, 7, 7, 10 months intrauterine life. 5, 5, 7, 7, 10. So a center for manubrium appears by 5 months intrauterine life. Body has 4 centers which appear again in the intrauterine life at 5 months, 7, 7, and 10 months. Okay. So manubrium, 1 center at 5 months, body 4 centers at 5th, 7th, and 7th and 10th month. For Ziffy, the appearance will be by 3 years after birth. 3 years after birth. So 5, 5, 7, 7, 10. This is how the ossification centers appear, because appearance is also a frequently asked question in case of sternum. Okay. Now, so as I just discussed, this is how it appears. 5, yes, 5, 5, 7, 7, and 10, and 3 years for Ziffy star. When will they fuse? See the body, I just take a highlighter here. So the body fuses by 14 to 25 years. So body becomes a single bone by 14 to 25 years. And then the Ziffy fuses with the body. Ziffy fuses with the body by 40 years. Okay, body becomes a single bone 14 to 25. Ziffy fuses with the body by 40 years, and the manubrium with the body, old age they say. Some textbooks also just take a pen. Some textbook gives this as 60 years. So old age, I'm taking the standard reference from Dr. Narayan Reddy's textbook, but some textbooks also say the old age is about by 60 years. Okay, so this is how the ossification centers appear and fuse for sternum. Next, well, this is again very frequently asked question. Very frequently asked question. Okay, now first of all, let's start with the skull. So 2 to 4 years. What is this? Metopic suture. So metopic suture, the suture which divides the frontal bone into two parts, fuses by 2 to 4 years. And if it doesn't fuse and if it is persistent, then persistent metopic suture is called metopic syndrome or metopism. Metopic syndrome or metopism. Okay, then sagittal. This is again a frequently asked question. See, sagittal suture fuses in 3 installments. Okay, anterior 1/3, followed by posterior 1/3, and then the middle 1/3. Okay, anterior 1/3, posterior 1/3, then middle 1/3. Anterior 1/3 fuses by 20 to 30 years. 20 to 30 years, followed by posterior 1/3, 30 to 40 years. 30 to 40 years, and then the middle 1/3, 40 to 50 years. Okay, so I'll come again. Sagittal suture, 3 parts: anterior 1/3, 20 to 30 years, posterior 30 to 40 years, and the middle 1/3, 40 to 50 years. Then coronal suture. So this is coronal. So coronal suture, as you can see, the lower half you can divide into 2 parts. The lower half fuses by 40 to 50 years, upper half by 50 to 60 years. Lower half 40 to 50, upper half 50 to 60 years. And the last one to fuse, this is also a question. So the last suture to fuse is temporal. Temporal, which fuses after 80 years. Which fuses after 80 years. Okay, so I hope this makes the points clear. Frequently asked question, and I suppose probably I missed it. Even sacrum was also asked. If I remember correctly from the students. Yeah, sacrum. Yes, sacrum. When will it fuse? So sacrum, all the segments of the sacrum, they become a single bone by 25 years. In fact, the range given is 22 to 25. An average you can take it as around 25 years. So sacrum becomes a single bone by 25 years. Okay, let's move to the next question. Well, the question was something like this. Most common mode of lead poisoning in industrial workers. Industrial workers. It had to be. I feel this has to be one of the simplest question. So ingestion, by ingestion, no. By skin absorption, no. Well, the answer definitely is inhalation. Inhalation is definitely the correct answer. The other option I couldn't get it, but inhalation is definitely the correct answer. Okay. Now, regarding lead, which is one of the very frequently asked questions for us, what are the points that you need to know? Okay, so inhalation of lead dust and fumes of white lead and by uses of lead paints, most common source of exposure. This is the most common source of exposure. Absorption is greater and rapid by inhalation. Okay, it's much rapid than ingestion and by absorption through the skin by inhalation. Very important points to remember. First of all, facial pallor. Chronic lead poisoning I'm talking about. Chronic lead poisoning is a repeated question for you. Facial pallor. Earliest manifestation of lead poisoning. Circumoral facial pallor is the earliest manifestation of lead poisoning. Second, blood picture. So what is the picture you get? Anemia. It is usually microcytic hypochromic anemia. Microcytic hypochromic anemia. Then Punctate basophilia. Punctate basophilia, also called as basophilic stippling. Basophilic stippling. What are they? Multiple blue colored dots seen within the cytoplasm of RBC. Multiple blue colored dots seen within cytoplasm of RBC is a repeated question. Basophilia word has got nothing to do with basophils. Okay, basophilic stippling, and then eosinophilia. So this is the blood picture. Then lead line, that is Burtonian blue line. Blue Burtonian line which is seen at the junction of the teeth and the gums. Teeth and the gums. Blue Burtonian line. Then lead palsy. Lead palsy affects the extensor group of muscles, thereby the patient presents with wrist drop or foot drop. Okay, extensor group of muscles, thereby patient presenting with wrist drop or foot drop. Then dry belly ache. See, basically the colicky and constipation of lead poisoning is been given these fancy names. Which are they? Dry belly ache, Devon colic, Painter's colic. Basically, it is constipation of colic and constipation of lead poisoning, and lead encephalopathy. Important features of chronic lead poisoning. Diagnosis. A repeated question for you. Diagnosis here. Coproporphyrin 3. Remember this. So students, please remember this. Coproporphyrin 3 is the most valuable screening test. So blood levels, anything above 0.7, 0.07 milligram percent, blood 0.07 milligram percent, and in the urine 0.15 to 0.3 milligram per liter is diagnostic. Coproporphyrin 3, blood 0.07 milligram percent, urine 0.15 to 0.3 milligram per liter are diagnostic. Treatment, calcium disodium EDTA plus BAL. If it is an option, calcium disodium EDTA plus BAL, that would be best. A single best, calcium disodium EDTA would be single best answer. So all the important features of chronic lead poisoning. Next question. Well, again, recall question. Probably the question goes like this. In a police custody, an accused was placed in prone position with his ankles and wrists, ankles and wrists bound behind his back. Bound behind his back. What is this called as? Very clearly you can see this is called hog tying. Hog tying. Yes, this is hog tying. Yes. So this is hog tying. Okay. So wherein the hands and the ankles are tied behind the back and the person is put in prone position. Okay. Prone position. Now the other option which I suppose was falaka. This is falaka. Continuously, this is falaka. Continuously beating on the sole. It's also called as falanga. Falanga, also sometimes referred as bastinado. Bastinado. Falaka, falanga, continuously beating on the sole. Okay. Then I suppose there was also option of carotid hold. Carotid hold. Now carotid restraint hold and choke hold, they are a bit different. Okay. See, this is carotid restraint, wherein, as you can very clearly see here, it is by the bend of the elbow. The neck is caught by the bend of the elbow, and the application of pressure is along the sideways. So this is carotid restraint. So by the bend of the elbow, and the application of force is on the side of the neck. Whereas here this is choke hold, again by the arm, directly by the forearm. So straight here on the neck. Okay, by the bend of the elbow, carotid restraint, choke hold is directly like this. Okay, very clearly given in the photographs. Okay, just a minute. Before ending this, let me give out some other forms of torture which are commonly asked for us. So other than this, what are the other forms of torture which we commonly know? So we just discussed hog tying, the carotid restraint and choke hold, falaka or falanga. Now the others one, telephono, that is continuously beating on the ears. Telephono, continuously beating on the ears. Okay. Then la bandera. The la bandera or bandera is suspension by the wrists. Suspending a person for a long time by the wrists. Suspension by the wrist. Ulta suspension, suspending a person by the ankles is Murcielago. Murcielago is suspension by ankles. Ulta suspension, suspension by ankles. Then cattle prod, cattle prod. Cattle prod meaning frequent electric shocks. Frequent electric shock is cattle prod. Okay. Then dry submarino. Dry submarino or submarine, sometimes it's called as. Dry submarine is a condition wherein, see, the hands are tied behind the back and a thin plastic cover is put on the head. Plastic cover is put up on the head and it is what you can say tied across the neck, and the person is asked to breathe through it. He cannot take the help of his hands as they're tied behind the back. As he keeps on breathing through it, the moisture accumulates within this plastic cover and the plastic cover gets adherent to the nose and the mouth. He becomes severely asphyxiated, cannot breathe. They remove it and again ask him to breathe through that plastic cover. So that is dry submarino. Then opposite of that is wet submarino or wet submarine, wherein the face of this person is immersed into foul water or foul fluid like a gutter water. Okay, it is immersed, face is immersed into gutter water. He cannot hold, he has to breathe that. So these are the different types of methods of torture. Okay, all this completes the questions that were posed for INI-CET in 2021. Wishing you all the very best.